This piece is called Redefine, and it is my contribution to Flash Friday. I think I wrote it back in 2009. Her eyes opened. She heard a pin drop. Literally, one pin from the pincushion off the desk must have somehow rolled off and fallen to the floor. Anne licked her lips. Her body had been punctured earlier by pins and needles, causing a sensation of warmth to flood her being. Prior till that, she'd been ordered to strip and stand in the middle of the living room. Her master had an audience look at her, all eyes glued to her round tits and perfect ass. Or were the mouths watering at her shaved cunt? She couldn't discern if there were 6 or 7 guests, but it didn't matter. The only thing she had to focus on would be her master. She didn't know how, but she remembered the heat creeping up over her cheeks. Her master had reassured her with the simple touch on the small of her back. Fingers skittered along her skin so lightly that only an experienced submissive would have felt them. A tiny shiver raced through her body, steadying her head and reminding her that her place was not to question, but to obey. An hour later, she'd been whipped with both a single tail and a bullwhip. Thankfully, the living room of their condo was large enough to throw a 6-foot whip in. The pricks of the cracker fell against her skin and sent more tremors racing through her. The audience remained silent, all while she only gasped occasionally at a sting that took her by surprise. Anne smiled at the thought of how those stings popped her thighs, her hips, nipples, and that delectable sweet spot on the inside of her ass cheek near her throbbing cunt. Before she left for work this morning, her master left her a note. "You work too much. You're lacking. Time for training to refocus you." That was all it said. Her body thrummed with anticipation, even as tension mounted from her strenuous job. Department heads wanted deadlines met, accountants wanted receipts for travel, her boss wanted answers and a date she continued to refuse. This had been her life over the previous few months as a programmer. Then she showed up at Master's house and began to panic. He simply commanded her to enter, strip, and let go. But letting go was hard to do. So much shit in her head bogged her down and made her posture slouch. Stumbling inside the house, she couldn't quite keep her eyes open. Her body wanted, but her mind couldn't deal. Seeing Master cross his arms over a rather large chest made her swallow the lump in her throat. He cleared his throat and lowered his narrow black eyes at her. "You're overworked as usual. How do you expect to submit to me properly?" Opening her mouth to respond, she found no words coming out. He sighed. Tilting his head to one side, he smiled. "We'll fix you." After some cuddling and tea, she felt her mind slowly awaken. During the whipping, each sting that landed on her body made her wet her, brought her mind to a halt. The surprise of where the pops would rain down on her skin was fluid, controlled. Each one designed to pull her mind towards the one thing: pain. Redefined focus. This wasn't so much for him as it was for her. The whips were replaced by simple pins and needles. By now, her body had been reddened all over. Breasts, hips, thighs, ass, back, all had burning whip welts that would be gone by morning. With meticulous care, needles poked through her nipples so that she had 4 needles sticking out like compass points from swollen peaks. Sucking in a breath with each one, she let out a slow whoosh of air when the needle pierced flesh. Red-hot pain shot through her body before suddenly turning to molten lust. "You'll have to wait a moment so we can start again." Her master's gruff voice vibrated against her ear, sending shivers through her. Her pussy was so wet she could smell it. Trepidation at the first needle bounced around in her stomach like dozens of butterflies until the needle poked through the other side of her nipple. When Master was finished, Anne looked down at her breasts and saw the 8 needles sticking out from them. Her body had relaxed, letting her mind take over. The workday slowly slipped away, replaced by something more powerful. Tranquility. "Watch her come in an instant," Master told the audience. The next sensation Anne felt was so quick, her body responded just as Master predicted. His fingers slid inside her wet, well-lubricated cunt and fondled her throbbing clit. A pair of lips locked onto hers, pulling her tongue from her mouth into his while being finger-fucked. Anne couldn't take it. The needles, the whip earlier, fingers, and sensual feel of his mouth on hers sent the wiring in her head on fire. Her body quivered, need pulsing through her with each stroke of those perfectly sized fingers inside her. Release forced her to thrash around wildly against Master. Her body took all of his movements, riding his hand until she felt she was spent. But he didn't stop there. Master continued finger-fucking her, wringing out one more orgasm before letting her fall into his arms like a limp noodle. Panting, forcing her head up, she looked at him through half-open eyes. He smiled, kindness in his expression softening his features. "Time for rest, my sweet submissive. You have a lot of work to do now that we've refocused you. And I have to finish entertaining our guests." She completely forgot about the audience of 6 or 7 people watching her performance, and forgot about her job, her stress, and everything else, letting them melt into nothingness when sleep hit. And this was the first of hopefully many Flasher Fridays for you folks on the YouTubes, the Twitters, the iTunes, wherever I can get this uploaded. Patreon link down below, and thank you for listening.